Well, good morning, AARP North Dakota members and friends. We're back with another episode of All Things AARP North Dakota, where, as you know, twice a month, we come on, we talk about what AARP is up to in and around your community, a little bit about our advocacy work, and then our wild card segment, the AARP add-on. So let's get started and start with AARP North Dakota in your community. As you're probably aware, AARP North Dakota does a lot of work on fraud, and it's not just North Dakota that does a lot of work on fraud. The source of that information for us comes from the AARP Fraud Watch Network and our outstanding fraud team. And I'm super excited because we have a key member of that team with us today, Seth Boffeli. Seth is a senior advisor for the Fraud Prevention Program. And more importantly, for those of you watching, Seth is a former state office team member, so he knows about the work on the ground, not just from the high level. Seth, thanks for joining All Things AARP North Dakota. How you doing?
Hey, good. Coming to you this morning from your neighbor to the east in Minnesota. Don't hold that against me.
Well, we like Minnesotans, Seth, and thank you for joining with us today. You know, I know right now it's kind of a busy season, especially as it relates to Medicare and Medicare time to do renewals or check in their Part D program or enrollment for Medicare, et cetera. And if there's anything I've learned from you and your friends at the fraud prevention team and with the Fraud Watch Network, it's that if there's something active and happening, especially nationwide, that's often a place where scammers tend to prey. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity. But, you know, we always say scammers follow the headlines. And the headline right now, starting on Monday, is Medicare open enrollment season. It starts October 15th, runs until the middle of December. And so this is a time for people on Medicare to go around and shop for a new plan. It's also a time for people on Medicare to be marketed to. And so it's an important time to sort of remember kind of the hallmarks of Medicare fraud so you can keep yourself safe. And Josh, the bottom line is scammers during this time are looking for two things. They're looking for people's subscriber number, your Medicare number, and they're looking to use that number to bill Medicare for services that you don't get. And so it's really important, if you are shopping for a new plan, to never give out that number to somebody who maybe contacts you or randomly through the mail or email or through your telephone number. And also don't accept free items. So one popular way that scammers take advantage of Medicare is by offering people free services that they don't really need. And sometimes they're bogus. So they might be a fake genetic test to tell if you're susceptible to forms of cancer. It might be fake COVID tests that just show up at your doorstep. Once they have your number, they can bill Medicare for services that you don't get. So that's why it's really important. That Medicare number is something that should only be given out to your trusted healthcare providers. Also, if you are on Medicare, you get that monthly statement of benefits. Look at that statement. Make sure that what Medicare or the government's been charged for are things that you actually got.
So Seth, a couple of follow-up questions, and I think that's so important. And I know we typically talk about it when we talk to folks about these red flags. And I think you touched on a few of them, but you know, do the same principles apply about they try and get you into a heightened emotional state in terms of making a decision quickly, or is that not necessarily as true on the Medicare fraud side of things?
No, it definitely is. Again, what they're looking for is that personal information and specifically that Medicare number. So sometimes it's like, here's a free thing or here's an important test. One thing to know is if it is a test that you might need, by giving that, by that scammer claiming that service for you that you don't actually get, might preclude you from getting the actual test later on. Josh, I'll tell you an example that we just have been dealing with lately. We've actually been talking to some members of Congress and their staff about this. So about a month ago, Medicare used to pay for all COVID tests, 100% reimbursement.
Yep.
That ended a month or so ago. What we saw was scammers sending Medicare recipients unsolicited 10, 20, 30 COVID scams, as many as 40, or I shouldn't say COVID tests, that the individuals never requested. And that happened because that crook had that person's Medicare number. So they could jam as many tests as they could get in the mail and claim them all and get paid for them. And so we didn't even know if those tests were real, if they were fraudulent. And so what we were telling people is just throw them away. You never requested them. You don't know who sent them to you. You don't know if they're even effective or not. But that's just one example. Once the crooks have your Medicare number, they can literally bill Medicare for services that you maybe never received or honestly never requested.
Seth, thank you for sharing that story. I think that's super helpful. I want you to highlight for folks a little bit about when we say AARP works on fraud and defense against fraud and also helps people. When you say you've heard from folks about this and you were telling them what to do with them, explain a little bit about what you mean. I presume you're talking about the fraud helpline and about the volunteers that help folks with that. So talk just a little bit about AARP's work of not just helping folks recognize that what scams are available, but we actually have a Fraud Watch helpline. Marnie just put it on the screen where folks can call and explain that a little bit for folks.
Yeah, sure. And so this is a national epidemic. So last year, just of the scams that were reported, there were $9 billion in fraud losses. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And in North Dakota, there's sort of good news, bad news. North Dakota was 50th out of 100 states per capita in complaints. So you guys are better than any other states in the low number of complaints. But even with that, $11 million in consumer losses were reported in North Dakota last year. And the average North Dakotan who reported losing money to scams lost $800. So that's money that you can't afford to come out of your own personal bank account, out of your state budget. And also for people who lose, or your state economy, but people who lose money, I mean, it's a devastating thing, not just financially, but emotionally as well. And so we have volunteers Monday through Friday from coast to coast who help take calls from people who have been victimized. And so if you or a loved one has either lost money in a scam, you might be in the middle of a scam and don't know how to get out of it, or if you just get an opportunity, you're not sure if it's legitimate or not, call that number on the screen. Somebody can help you figure out what's next, what the right steps to take are.
Yeah, with us today and this morning is Seth Boffeli. He is a senior advisor for the fraud prevention program at AARP. We're super excited. Seth, in addition to the fraud helpline, which you just talked about, talk a little bit about there's a AARP Fraud Watch network. We've said that multiple times now, where there's a plethora of resources. It's oftentimes when we get calls about potential scams or things where we go to in the state office. So talk a little bit about that resource as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a digital sort of one-stop shop. One of the great things on there are we have tip sheets on over 80 different scams. So say you get solicitation for a, to get out of your timeshare. You can go on there, look up a tip sheet on a timeshare scam, sort of see if the things that you're being confronted with match sort of the hallmarks of a typical scam. Keeping ahead of these scammers are like whack-a-mole. So this is a good resource. There's investigative articles. One great thing that we offer on there is we call it the Watchdog Alert. So every other Tuesday on your phone or in your email, you're going to get an alert with a trending scam or something we're seeing through the helpline, what to look out for, how to stay safe. It's a great way to sort of proactively keep yourself ahead of the game. If you're into podcasts, there's an award-winning podcast that's on there. Lots of great resources on that website. And a great, and I should say too, what you guys do in North Dakota and your community work is outstanding. This is such an epidemic and we can't reach people in enough ways. I know you're talking about advocacy next. Advocacy is something that you guys have gotten a big win on in fraud advocacy in North Dakota. We can't communicate enough. We can't educate enough, and we can't advocate enough just because we know these criminals are going after us each and every day, and we just have to stay vigilant.
Well, part of the reason we do good work in North Dakota, Seth, is because we've got great folks like you and the fraud prevention team backing us up and helping us out. Seth, talk to me about anything else you want to share specifically. Again, I loved your line about scams often follow the headlines. I think that you put it much more succinctly than I tripped over myself earlier about it. But anything else you just want to make sure folks know before we let you get out of here this morning?
Yeah, I always say sort of three things, and it's hard. We get caught up. Everybody has a day where something's going on that your mind is somewhere else, and one of these things lands in your lap, and before you know it, you're sort of caught up in the narrative. So I always say sort of three things: stop, think, and verify. So if you think if there's a problem you have to solve, or there's an opportunity you have to take advantage of, just make yourself stop. Hang up the phone, walk away from the computer. Next step is think about it. Is this legitimate? Does this sound right? And even if you think, hey, maybe this person is in trouble, maybe this is my grandchild and she's in jail and she needs to be bailed out, verify it. Take that third step, call that grandkid. If you think it's your bank and there's been fraudulent charges, take out your bank card, flip it over, call the number on the back, independently verify that what you're being presented with is really legitimate. Technology is advancing so fast that these frauds look more and more legitimate each and every day, and which is why it's important for us to be skeptical and to be our own detective. Take the steps. It's your money. You worked very hard to get it. You should work just as hard to give it away.
Seth, always good to see you, my friend. Always great to have our folks from our eastern border come share with us, especially when we're talking about fraud. Appreciate all of your support, Seth, and thanks for being with us today on AARP North Dakota in your community. With that, we're going to flip over and talk a little bit about advocacy, and specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about local advocacy. And in our AARP North Dakota advocacy segment today, we're going to talk about some work we've been doing in Bismarck and Mandan around transit. Specifically, and most recently, at the October 4th meeting of the Mandan City Commission, the Mandan City Commission voted to provide $44,835 in funding for Bismarck Transit's paratransit services for 2023. What that funding means is folks who need the paratransit service after hours, who are ADA eligible but don't fit the definitions for the current service or need it outside of the general service hours, will continue to receive services this year and be able to get those services this year. This follows work we did in July with volunteers in front of the Bismarck City Commission, where they voted to provide over $250,000 to ensure that folks don't lose access to that needed service in 2023 and 2024. So we still have work to do, but the paratransit service in Bismarck and Mandan ensures that riders with disabilities and those over the age of 70 have a safe, affordable transportation option when they need it. And this funding shortfall really threatened the ability to access those services outside of the normal paratransit operations. They call it non-ADA service. That was and is provided by Bismarck Transit. It's a service that's offered in addition to the federally funded ADA or Americans with Disabilities paratransportation option, also provided by Bismarck Transit. AARP volunteers, I can't thank you if you were one of the folks who sent an email to the Bismarck City Commission or the Mandan City Commission or spoke up in support of those efforts. We really want to thank you, and it's just a testament to the work AARP continues to do to be a fierce defender for those 50 and older in North Dakota. That is our AARP North Dakota advocacy segment for this week's episode. With that, we're going to go to our wild card segment, our friend, the AARP North Dakota add-on, and we kind of cheated a little bit because Seth Boffeli did an awesome job telling you a little bit about what the AARP North Dakota add-on is for this episode, and it's the AARP Fraud Watch Network. As Seth said, there's over 80 different scams that you can find tip sheets on. There's access to the award-winning podcast on scams and alerts. You can sign up for different alerts of things that are happening. We're hearing and continue to see, and Seth's team does a great job. Seth's a member of a team that does a great job of, if it happens in Wyoming or happens in South Carolina, it's likely coming to North Dakota or happening in North Dakota. And so keeping track of those trends and letting you know what's happening around the country so you can be aware and protect yourself, your family, and your hard-earned money. That is this episode's AARP North Dakota add-on. With that, we got through another All Things AARP North Dakota. As you can see, we've been on the road this week and still on the road this week. So thanks for your flexibility and sticking with us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We're going to be back on October 26th. And on October 26th, we're going to introduce our Andrus Award for Community Service recipient, as well as probably the nominees. So you'll hear a little bit about folks that are doing outstanding volunteer work in North Dakota and their communities. Thanks for watching. See you on October 26th.